She put on her red lipstick the way she always did. She laughed with her friends in her garden. She tucked her 4 little boys into bed and kissed them goodnight, and she never woke up again. Jade Ward was 27 years old. She was not famous. She was not a public figure. She was a working mother from a small town in North Wales who loved clothes, dancing, and her children more than anything else in the world. She had spent years trying to survive a controlling relationship, and when she finally found the courage to walk away for good, the man who claimed to love her decided that if he could not have her, no one else would either. What happened in that house in Shotton in the early hours of 26th August 2021 was not an accident. It was not a sudden loss of control. It was the final act of a man who had spent years trying to own a woman he never deserved. But this story does not end with a murder. It ends with a mother's name written into the law of the United Kingdom, because Jade's family refused to let her death mean nothing. This is the story of Jade Ward. Love true crime? The Ultimate Serial Killer colouring book features 65 notorious killers brought to life in bold black and white line art. Single-sided pages dark, detailed, unforgettable. Available now on Amazon. Jade Ward grew up in Shotton, a small working-class town in Flintshire, North Wales. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where people go to school together, marry people they grew up with, and raise their families within a few miles of where they were born. By the time she was in her early 20s, Jade had become one of those people that communities quietly depend on. Her family described her as bubbly, warm, and full of life. They said she always saw the good in people, even when those people did not deserve it. She was the type of woman who would get upset if someone killed a fly. She cared deeply about animals, children, and the people around her. She had a distinctive personal style. She loved clothes. She was always put together, always wearing her signature red lipstick, always walking into a room with a presence that people remembered long after she left. Her family said that when Jade entered a room, it lit up. She was the life of the party. She was always dancing, and she was a mother. That was the role she was most proud of. By her mid-20s, Jade had 4 sons, 4 boys she absolutely adored. Every tribute, every court statement, every parliamentary debate about her life circled back to the same thing. Jade lived for her children. She would do anything for them. They were her entire world. She worked at the local co-op, a normal job in a normal town, raising 4 children, being the glue that held her family together. Her mother, Karen Robinson, later said it perfectly. Jade was just a normal girl working a part-time job. That was who she was, not a headline, not a statistic, a real person, living a real life. Jade met Russell Norman Marsh when she was still young. By the time their relationship became serious, they had settled into the kind of pattern that is easy to fall into when you're raising children together, a cycle of closeness, tension, and hope that things will get better. Russell Marsh was charming enough on the surface, but behind closed doors, people who were close to Jade began to notice something else. Marsh was controlling. He kept track of who she spoke to. He had opinions about what she wore, who she could see, where she could go. In Parliament, MP Mark Tammy would later describe it clearly. Marsh controlled who Jade could see, who she could speak to, what she could wear, and what she could do. Karen Robinson would later reflect that she could see the signs even then. Marsh buying Jade clothes and jewellery she did not want, as if he were trying to reshape her into a version of herself that belonged to him rather than to herself. Jade and Marsh had 4 sons together. They were married, and the relationship separated not once, not twice, but 3 times over roughly 9 years. During one of those separations in summer 2019, not long after their wedding, Marsh was accused of bruising Jade's wrists. He denied any violence. Nothing changed. They reconciled. As so often happens in relationships shaped by coercive control, the cycle continued. Throughout those years, Jade remained the warm, social, loving presence her friends and family described. She went to work. She raised her boys. She danced at parties and lit up rooms and wore her red lipstick and told herself, perhaps, that things would eventually be different. By the summer of 2021, something had shifted. Jade was 27 years old. Her boys were growing up. And she made a decision that those close to her understood was final. She ended the relationship with Russell Marsh. She told him to leave the family home, and she told the people she trusted most, her closest friends, her family, that this time it was permanent. This time it was for good. According to reports that would later emerge at trial, Jade had begun moving forward with her life. She was attending social events. She was reconnecting with friends. She was seen kissing another man at a party, a small, human, perfectly ordinary act of beginning again. When that information reached Russell Marsh, something inside him darkened. Marsh reportedly told friends that if he could not have Jade, no one could. Those words were not taken seriously enough. They rarely are, until it is too late. What makes the story of Jade Ward particularly heartbreaking is not just what happened to her. It is who she was in the days before it happened. In her final days, Jade was caring for her grandmother, who had recently undergone surgery. She was sitting in her garden, laughing with her friends. She was taking care of her children, providing for them, planning for them. In Parliament, where her case would later be debated, she was described as living her final days in exactly this way, doing the things she'd always done, being the person she had always been. On Wednesday, 25th August 2021, the day before she was murdered, North Wales Police later confirmed that Jade spent time with her 4 children, her friends, and her family. That night, she put her boys to bed and went to sleep in her home on Chevrons Road, Shotton. Russell Marsh was working an overnight shift at Bioenergy in Ellesmere Port when he made a decision that would end Jade's life and destroy 4 children's world. He approached his supervisor and told him he needed to leave early. His brother, he said, had taken an overdose and needed hospital treatment. It was, according to the prosecution, a lie. Marsh left work, got in his vehicle, and drove toward North Wales. CCTV cameras tracked his route. Automatic number plate recognition systems logged his progress. Phone mast data traced his movements as he crossed into Flintshire. He was not rushing in a panic. He was driving deliberately, methodically, toward the house, where Jade and their 4 children were sleeping. He arrived at the family home on Chevrons Road in the early hours of August 26, 2021. The boys were asleep. The house was quiet. What happened next is the hardest part of this story to write. And, for Jade's family, the hardest part to have heard repeated in a courtroom. Marsh entered the home. He found Jade in her bedroom, and he attacked her. He slashed her. He stabbed her. He strangled her. The pathology evidence later presented at trial showed multiple wounds across her body, including her face and her arms. It showed bruising consistent with grip marks. It showed defensive injuries around her hands. Jade fought back. Even in those final moments, Jade Ward fought to live. But Russell Marsh was bigger and stronger, and consumed by something that forensic psychology would later try to name, but that her family would always call by its simplest name: rage. Rage that she had chosen herself. Rage that she had moved on. Rage that she had decided her life was hers. The cause of death was asphyxiation. After killing her, Marsh covered Jade's body with a pile of clothes. He secured the bedroom door with a dressing gown cord, and then, and this is perhaps the most chilling detail of all, he went to his sleeping sons, woke them up, and drove them to his parents' home near Chester. He then walked into Blackham Police Station and handed himself in. When officers arrived at Chevrons Road shortly before 9:20 a.m. on 26th August 2021, they found Jade's body in her bedroom, covered under clothing. She was 27 years old. The shock in Shotton was immediate. Within hours, a roadside memorial began to grow outside the family home on Chevrons Road. Flowers, balloons, photographs, candles, teddy bears, handwritten notes from people who loved her, people who knew her, and strangers who had only heard her name that morning. Jade's family issued a tribute through North Wales Police. They described her as kind, caring, the sunshine in their lives, the glue that held the family together. They said she was loved by everybody who had the privilege of knowing her, and that her life had been ahead of her. Jade's sister, Taylor Wesley, later organised a balloon release on Chevrons Road. Hundreds of people came. Taylor said Jade would have been so proud because the turnout showed how loved she was. A GoFundMe campaign was set up almost immediately for the boys. The people who loved Jade recognised what the children needed. Clothes, because the family could not yet access the house. New bedrooms, furniture, birthdays, Christmas, bank accounts for the future, university one day. Everything that a mother who had been robbed of her future could no longer give them herself. The fundraiser raised over £16,000 from more than 650 donations. Russell Marsh appeared before Mould Crown Court via video link from HMP Berwyn in November 2021 and entered a plea of not guilty to both murder and manslaughter. The trial that followed was not only a legal proceeding, it was for Jade's family a second ordeal. Marsh did not simply deny killing Jade. He offered explanations that attempted to shift the blame onto her. He initially claimed her death was accidental, alleging she had asked him to choke her during sex. When that explanation failed to hold, he told the jury that Jade had mutilated herself and then taunted him. The jury heard him. They considered what he said. And then, after around 2 hours of deliberation, on April 6, 2022, they returned a verdict of guilty of murder. Jade's family sat through the entire trial. They listened to every version of events Marsh offered. They listened to what the judge would later call falsehoods and slurs directed at Jade and her family. They sat there and endured it, because they had no other choice. Judge Rhys Rowlands praised them for their restraint. On April 12, 2022, Russell Marsh was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 25 years before he could be considered for parole. Judge Rowlands addressed Marsh directly. He described him as possessive, jealous, self-pitying, and resentful. He said Marsh had subjected Jade to a prolonged and cruel attack because she had dared, in Marsh's eyes, to end the controlling and unequal relationship they had shared. He said Marsh had been consumed by self-pity and jealousy, and that he had shown no real remorse throughout the proceedings. He said that Jade had found living with Marsh very difficult because of his possessive behaviour. He said the attack was brutal. He said the children had been just yards away. For Jade's family, the life sentence felt like justice. Finally, something that matched the weight of what had been done. But within days of the verdict, they discovered something that turned their grief into fury. Russell Marsh still had parental responsibility for the boys. Forensic and investigative analysis. The investigation into Jade Ward's murder is a strong example of how modern domestic homicide cases are built around digital evidence, not just physical crime scenes. Marsh's movements before the murder were reconstructed almost entirely through technology. CCTV footage tracked his car leaving the area near Ellesmere Port. A NPR camera's automatic number plate recognition logged his vehicle at specific locations at specific times, building a timestamp trail from his workplace towards Shotton. Phone mast data placed his mobile device moving in the same direction, corroborating the vehicle evidence independently. This digital reconstruction was critical because Marsh's defence depended on casting doubt on intent and planning. The movement evidence showed he did not arrive at the house by chance or in an uncontrolled moment of passion. He used a false excuse to leave work. He drove a significant distance. He arrived at a specific address. Each of those steps is a deliberate choice. The physical evidence from the scene told a different story from the one Marsh offered in court. Pathology reports identified multiple injuries across Jade's body. Wounds to her face and arms, bruising consistent with grip force and the defensive injuries on her hands that confirmed she had fought back. The cause of death, asphyxiation, was consistent with strangulation, one of the most intimate and deliberate forms of killing. The bedroom door had been secured with a dressing gown cord and Jade's body had been covered with clothing. Both of these details pointed to post-mortem concealment, behaviour designed to delay discovery and create time for Marsh to remove the children and hand himself in on his own terms. Marsh's strategy of handing himself in is also forensically significant. By arriving at a police station and saying he had done something horrible, he controlled the initial narrative of the investigation. He was the one who reported it. He set the timeline. This is not unusual in domestic homicide cases. Perpetrators who control the scene and the discovery often attempt to control the investigation from the moment it begins. The case also later became the subject of a social media murders documentary episode, which cited digital forensics and body camera footage as key elements of the evidential picture. Social media and messaging data, WhatsApp activity, call logs, movement between contacts, increasingly form part of the investigative record in domestic homicide cases, helping establish patterns of behaviour before the crime occurs. Psychological analysis. The murder of Jade Ward fits a pattern that researchers in the field of domestic homicide have studied for decades, but which courts, communities, and families only began to fully name and recognise in relatively recent years. That pattern has a name: coercive control, and it is the architecture beneath everything that happened in this case. Coercive control is not a single act of violence. It is a sustained system of behaviours designed to dominate, monitor, and limit a partner's autonomy. It includes controlling who they see, what they wear, where they go, and what they do. Exactly the behaviours that MP Mark Tammy described in Parliament when he spoke about Jade's relationship with Marsh. It is psychological before it is physical. It operates through erosion, not explosion. The most dangerous moment in a relationship defined by coercive control is not the middle. It is the end. Research consistently shows that the period when a victim tries to leave, or has already left, is when the risk of lethal violence is highest. This is sometimes called separation violence or separation assault. The logic, such as it is, runs through the perpetrator's distorted sense of ownership. If he cannot have her, no one can. Marsh reportedly said exactly those words. The judge described him as possessive, jealous, and self-pitying, unable to accept that Jade had ended the relationship. That characterization aligns with what researchers call a controlling or possessive personality in intimate partner violence. A person who experiences a partner's independence as a personal threat, who interprets separation as betrayal, and who uses violence not as a loss of control but as an assertion of it. The fact that Jade had kissed another man at a party, a completely ordinary act of beginning to rebuild her life, was presented at trial as a precipitating factor. This is consistent with a well-documented pattern in domestic homicide. The perpetrator's violence escalates at the moment the victim demonstrates independence, new social connections, or the possibility of a future without him. Marsh's behaviour after the murder also fits this profile. He moved the children. He handed himself in. He maintained enough functional composure to drive, navigate, and make decisions. This is not the behaviour of a man who had lost all control. It is the behaviour of a man who had made a choice and then managed the consequences. His shifting versions of events at trial, first accident, then self-inflicted, then provocation, are also psychologically consistent with what researchers describe as minimization, denial, and victim blaming. Strategies used by perpetrators to avoid full accountability even after conviction. None of this excuses what he did, but understanding it matters, because these same patterns exist in relationships across the country, right now, and recognizing them before they become lethal is the only way to stop more Jades from happening. Jade's Law. The Legacy. Here is the part of this story that Jade's family made possible. The part that Russell Marsh could never take away from her. After Marsh was convicted and sentenced to life, Jade's family expected to begin the long, painful process of rebuilding. What they'd discovered instead was a legal system that had not finished torturing them. Russell Marsh still had parental responsibility for Jade's 4 boys. Under UK law as it stood at the time of the murder, a conviction for killing your partner did not automatically remove your legal rights as a parent. Marsh could theoretically request school reports. He could receive medical information. He could influence decisions about schooling, dental care, therapy, holidays. He had murdered the mother of his children, and the law still gave him a seat at the table of their upbringing. Jade's father, Paul Ward, put it plainly: Marsh still had loads of power over the children. Jade's mother, Karen Robinson, said he was looming over them, over the boys, over everything. What Jade's family did next is the reason this story does not end in a courtroom. They campaigned. A petition calling for the automatic removal of parental responsibility from parents convicted of killing the other parent gathered 113,000 signatures in less than 3 weeks. Edwin Duggan, a family friend, helped drive the effort. Taylor Wesley, Jade's sister, said publicly that they had to be Jade's voice because hers had been taken away. Karen Robinson said she would never stop. They called it Jade's Law. In October 2023, the UK government announced that the Victims and Prisoners Bill would be amended to include exactly what Jade's family had been asking for. A parent who kills their partner or ex-partner with whom they share children would automatically have parental responsibility suspended at sentencing, subject to judicial review and child welfare safeguards. The reform was named after Jade Ward. It was included in the Victims and Prisoners Act 2024. As of early 2026, the government was still working through the implementation process, with the law expected to come into full force by the end of December 2026. It is not yet fully in place, but it is coming, and it is called Jade's Law because a 27-year-old mother from Shotton, who loved red lipstick and dancing and her 4 boys, made enough noise in death, through the family she left behind, to change the law of the land. That is who Jade Ward was, not only a victim, not only a name on a court file, a woman whose life meant something, and whose death is being turned slowly into something that will protect children who do not yet know they need protecting. Jade Ward deserved to grow old. She deserved to see her boys grow up. She deserved the future she was just beginning to reach for in those final weeks of her life. She did not get that, but her name is now written into British law, and that is something Russell Marsh, for all the damage he did, could not stop. If this story moved you, if it made you think of someone, share it. Because the more people understand what coercive control actually looks like, the more people might recognize it before it becomes a tragedy. Rest in peace, Jade.